Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Stout, and I work for Tactical Medical Solutions. Thank you very much for taking the opportunity today to join us for this webinar. May is National Stop the Bleed Month, so we wanted to dedicate this time to talking about Stop the Bleed, what it is, where it came from, what its history is, what its purpose is. And my goal with this is to pique your interest and make sure that you can go get yourself trained and certified, but also properly equipped. I've worked here at TacMed Solutions for the last 7 years. Prior to coming here at TacMed, my wife and I both served for 25 years at the Gainesville Police Department down in Florida. And we both retired as lieutenants, so I could come up here and work for TacMed. So I'll go ahead and address that right out of the gate. I really was a lieutenant. My first name's Dan, Lieutenant Dan. Magic legs, ice cream, all of that. Just have fun with that. My career was a little bit unique in that there was a point where I cross-trained as a paramedic, and I'll get into when and why that came about. But throughout my career, I had a lot of different assignments from patrol to school resource officer, canine handler. I was the medic on our SWAT team for 14 years. I was a patrol sergeant, training unit sergeant, patrol lieutenant, and then retired as the training lieutenant. So anytime I get a chance to come back into a quasi training role, it's always fun for me to come back and do this. So again, on behalf of TacMed, just thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. I'll try to keep it upbeat and moving forward, try to make it informative so that this isn't a waste of your time. And again, my goal is to pique your interest and drive you towards that live in-person training and getting properly equipped. So what is Stop the Bleed? Back up even before that really became a thing. When I was a young police officer, I was out there doing all the things, thought I was really cool until 1999. And the Columbine High School shooting went down. And I've got a couple guys here working with me, Nathaniel and Garrett behind the scenes, working the computers and the lights and the cameras. I'm gonna have Garrett pull up a photo for me so that y'all can see this. I watched the Columbine High School shooting unfold, just like everybody else did at the time from afar. But being in the first responder space, I was watching it and just didn't like what I was seeing, in that our playbook that we were all playing off of just wasn't working that day. And I tell people, you could have picked the incident from Columbine up, sat it down anywhere in the United States, the outcome was going to be the same, because that's just what we were trained to do at that time. And the biggest thing that punched me in the gut was my complete lack of medical capability at that time. Yes, I'd been trained in the Marine Corps on some basic trauma care, buddy aid, that kind of thing. And in the police academy, we got like a 40-hour true first aid class, nothing really related to trauma. Our answer back then was to call for an ambulance and throw them on the ambulance, and that's how things were solved. But as I watched that unfold, this photo was broadcast and on the TV, and they zoomed in on it. And what it is the news helicopters orbiting the scene, and they zoom in on this one window, and they notice this piece of white poster board up in the window. And if you can see it there and make it out, it says "1 bleeding to death." These kids had taken a white poster board from like a school project, flipped it over, and on the backside written that, we're holding it up in the window to try to let someone outside know they had a student in there who was very critically injured and was bleeding to death. And we needed, as a profession, to do better. You can go ahead and pull that photo down now. Thanks, Garrett. We needed to do better. We needed to do better at stopping the violence. We needed to do better at going direct to threat. And we needed to improve our medical capability. So as a first responder space, law enforcement, fire, and EMS, that was a huge pivot point for us. A couple years later, 9/11 hits. The profession just gets turned on its ear very quickly in a matter of a couple of years. Focus, training, capabilities, mission, all of those things changed dramatically. And while we were focusing on our space, there really wasn't a national push yet to address the average person just going about their business, having training and capability along these lines. So medical personnel, first responders, were always trained in CPR, but there had been a push for a long time through the American Red Cross, the American Heart Association, to get the general populace trained and confident in CPR, so that then they were out and about and a cardiac event happened, someone could engage, get 911 moving, and do something for that patient prior to the professional rescuer showing up on scene. but we weren't doing that yet in the realm of stop the bleed and trauma and things like that. Fast forward to 2012, and there was a very traumatic, another school shooting, Sandy Hook, up in Connecticut, and 20 kids between the ages of 6 and 7 were shot and killed by this attacker, and 6 adult staff members. That produced a working group that came out of that incident, and they produced a document that came to be known as the Hartford Consensus, which was a review of everything, best practices, again, trying to continue to improve first responders' reactions. But the big thing that came out of that for me was the push by one of the doctors on there to create Stop the Bleed and create a national campaign similar in, we want people to get trained in CPR and AED usage and be confident and ready to go. We wanted to train them on how to do some basic Stop the Bleed care. And fast forward to 2015, the Stop the Bleed bill was passed and signed by President Obama. So this is actually the 10th year that Stop the Bleed has been around and in existence. So that's the core of what it is it's a training program. The main initiative is targeting civilians to encourage people to go out, get trained, and get equipped. So that's the history of Stop the Bleed. The program is actually administered by the United States Department of Defense, the Pentagon. They issue licenses for being able to do the training, being able to sell trademarked items that have the little hand on them and stuff like that. So that's who administers the program. There's 2 main curriculums out there. One is produced by the American College of Surgeons. The other one is by an organization called the Stop the Bleed Coalition. They're both really good curriculums. I'll explain to you here how to get involved with either one of those organizations so you can see who's doing training in your area and go pursue that. But that's the whole mission of Stop the Bleed. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. Everybody thinks I'm going to immediately start diving in and talking about stopping the bleeding. There's a few factors that go along with this that we always want to cover. The first thing is safety. Everybody wants to make a difference. Everybody wants to get in there and do something. But if we just run head forward into this thing and we're not paying attention, we could become part of the problem. And if we get ourselves injured, we're not doing anybody any good. So look around and make sure that it's safe for you to be there doing what you're doing. And don't necessarily think that Stop the Bleed only applies to acts of violence, the school shooting, workplace violence, things like that. Yes, it applies there. It could also apply to natural disasters, motor vehicle crashes, industrial accidents. People, trust me, one thing I've learned throughout my career, people will go out of their way to find a way to get themselves messed up. Whatever that mechanism of injury is that's resulted in a traumatic injury, these techniques that we're going to cover today are in play, but there's still safety things. Yes, if it's an act of violence, is it over? Has the suspect left? If it's a motor vehicle crash, is the car in park? Is the car on fire? Is there a live electrical cable involved? Is the boat prop still spinning? Is the chainsaw still on? All of those types of things, we just need to make sure that we're being safe as we go in to render aid. So situational awareness, making a general impression of what's going on so that you know what you're walking into. The other aspect of safety, I could spend hours talking about this and you would regret it and really hate me. Bloodborne pathogens, okay? I'm not going to go high and to the right, deep dive into that. I'm going to summarize it in about 10 seconds. Bloodborne pathogens are very dangerous things that are out there in the blood and things of that nature. So just think of it as this. There's cooties out there in the world. You don't want cooties. So we're going to take a few steps and measures to protect ourselves. The most fundamental one that you can do is make sure that you're putting on gloves. If the patient is somebody that you know, you love, you care about, you're probably not going to take the time to do this. But if this is just out and about in the world and you don't know somebody, take the time to properly protect yourselves, don your gloves. If it comes down to CPR, don't administer breaths without some type of a barrier device. That's why they have compression only CPR at this point. I'm a big fan of a mask and a face shield over your eyes to keep blood splatter from splashing up into your mouth and your eyes. Take the necessary precautions to protect yourself. So that's that first step that we talk about with safety. So how do we know what we're getting ourselves into? How are we going to decide what to do? Stop the Bleed breaks it down into this phraseology. They say identify, react, and stop the bleed. I'm from the military. I'm from law enforcement. I'm from EMS. We love some acronyms, and we will make an acronym for anything. The one that I like, that I've used throughout my career, is PAFI, P-A-F-I. And it applies to anything from firearms to defensive tactics to just critical decision making. P is perceive. Perceive that something is going on. A is analyze. Go through your mental Rolodex of what your options are. F is formulate that plan. I is initiate it. Here's the thing. This is not a 10 to 15 minute thought exercise, working group. This is something that has to be done in a matter of seconds so that you can take everything in, make a decision, and go, that you're not just stuck in paralysis by analysis and an OODA loop and all that kind of fun stuff. So how do you get to that? Number one, it's training. Number two, it's repetition. If all you guys do is think that you've watched this webinar today and you're going to be able to recall this skill without ever actually physically doing it a year and a half from now, you're going to be very, very disappointed in the outcome and what your performance is. Again, today, this is just about piquing your interest, driving you to go get this basic training, get some fundamental equipment. But then I want you to continue to do this, practice it along the way, go get another class, go get more training, keep amping up your skills so that when that day comes where you finally do this, you're going to be very confident. You're going to be able to make that PAFI decision very quick and make a difference for this casualty. So as we're analyzing stop the bleed, there's a few things out there that we need to take into consideration. Number one is, what type of bleeding are we talking about? Where is it on the body? Those types of things. There's three major types of bleeding that we need to look for: capillary, venous, and arterial. Capillary is that very superficial, it's bubbly and frothy. It can be very painful for the patient. It's not life-threatening. This is the infamous road rash where a kid falls off their bike or somebody skins their thigh and their butt cheek sliding into second base playing city league softball. That's capillary. Venous bleeding. The blood is very, very dark red, almost the color purple. The reason is there's no oxygen in it, and it flows out of the body at a steady, even, consistent rate. So those horror movies where you see the body hit the ground and you see dark blood just slowly pooling away from the body, that's a pretty decent representation of venous bleeding. Arterial bleeding, that's the one that we should really be looking for. The blood is very bright red, it's full of oxygen, and it's usually, especially early on, pulsating and spraying as it's coming out. If we see blood that's doing that, it's go time. Again, combined with the mechanism of injury, how did this person get here? The volume, how much blood is out? Where is it on the body? The three main arteries that we're going to be contending with: the carotid artery on the side of either neck, the brachial artery in the upper arm from the shoulder to the elbow on the inside of the upper arm, and then the femoral artery from the groin to the inside of the knee, not on the outside of your thigh, on the inside of your leg. And again, the color, the action of the blood, all of those things are taken into consideration to figure out what type of blood we're dealing with and what's going on. At this stage, this is also a really good time, and I always encourage this: start talking to the patient. If you were the patient and you're lying there and nobody will look you in the face or talk to you or tell you what's going on, it's probably going to raise your apprehension, make you a little bit nervous, make you a little bit concerned about what's going on, versus if somebody's looking you in the face, "Hey, what's your name? My name's Dan. I'm here to help you. Are you okay with that?" At the same time, I'm doing two other things. One, I'm making sure I have consent to do this. So there's always questions that come up about, and in classes, I've seen this actually bogged down where people get really lost in the weeds on this. They want to have this big, long legal debate and all these things. Oh my gosh, what if they say they don't want to be treated? Things of that nature. In all of my career, I have never had anybody tell me, "No, you can't treat me, just leave me here to bleed to death." That's never happened, okay? It's still a good practice to ask them, "Hey, is it okay if I help you?" Yes. They nod their head, that's okay. If they're unconscious, we operate under what's called implied consent, meaning that if they were conscious and they looked down and they saw all this blood coming out of them, it's implied that they would want us to help them, so we're good to go. Not to mention the fact every state has their version of what is called Good Samaritan laws. So as long as what you're doing is in good faith, and then two other caveats: trained within the way that you're trained and with the equipment you were trained to operate with, you're going to be fine. As long as you stick to tourniquets and wound packing, the things that Stop the Bleed talks about, you're going to be okay. If you go out and get yourself YouTube certified and on surgical airways, and you decide you're going to pull out your Barlow pocket knife and disassemble a pen and field expedite a surgical airway on somebody, you own that. I never told you to do that. Okay. So stay within the left-right boundaries of what we're here talking about. Stop the bleed, tourniquets, wound packing, maybe some chest seals. You're going to be okay. All right. So there is that aspect of consent. We've covered that. The last thing that I want to make sure that you're covering during this assessment with the patient is just what we call their mental status. And another acronym for you, AVPU, AVPU. A means they're alert, V means they respond to verbal stimulus, P means they respond to painful stimulus, and U means they're unresponsive. Alert is you and I are having a conversation, you understand everything, you're firing on all cylinders, you can answer my questions, you're good to go. Verbal is you're a little bit sluggish, but I can still get you to respond to me verbally. I can call your name. You can sort of mumble a response. P means you're unconscious and you're not responding to me verbally, but I can either grind my knuckles into your sternum, I can pinch your earlobe real hard, and I can elicit a physical response from you. U means you're out. Nothing that I say you're responding to. You're not responding to any type of painful stimulus. That's not good. Trying to just get a starting baseline of where this person is helps you evaluate what's going on with this patient. If they're alert early on, 10 minutes later, they're getting sluggish. 5 minutes after that, they pass out. That kind of tells you that we're going this way. And it's a two-way street. They can actually start to be sluggish, lock everything down, stabilize them. They can actually start to answer questions a little bit better. So it's just a good way for you to gauge what's going on with your patient. But we're going to look for those life-threatening bleeds. We're going to look for those places on the body that we've already talked about, sides of the neck, the arms, the legs, and see what type of life-threatening bleeding is out there that we can deal with. All right, so I said we're going to talk about tourniquets and wound packing. There's one thing that we're going to start with first, and that is direct pressure and digital pressure. If you'll notice, the logo for Stop the Bleed is a little stop sign with a little hand on it. Stop the bleed. I actually really like that. I'm going to give Dr. Levy some credit. I heard him say this in a lecture, that he uses that to remind himself that the first thing that we should be doing is the old school direct pressure. Anybody that was a Boy Scout, Girl Scout, you learned direct pressure, elevation, pressure points. Just coming down with a hand on top of a wound that's bleeding and applying direct pressure gets things started. What I inevitably see a lot of times in scenario training with firefighters, law enforcement, soldiers, whoever it is, they'll walk up on the casualty, whatever is going on, and they realize they need a tourniquet. Somebody says, I need a tourniquet. And 20 seconds goes by, 30 seconds goes by as they're digging through a bag, pulling the stuff out. And the whole time, blood is still just coming out. We can still do something by just starting and coming down on the injury with direct pressure. With some of these bigger wounds that we're going to talk about for wound packing, you can actually get your fingers down in there and apply digital pressure to where the bleeding is coming from. I'll explain that a little bit more. But those basic fundamentals of direct pressure and digital pressure gets that bleeding cessation started until we can get the actual tourniquet or the intervention of wound packing in play. So don't forget direct pressure, digital pressure. All right, so the first actual tool that we're going to talk about is tourniquet application. Here in a little bit, I'm going to start working on this guy. All right, he's really cool. His name is Emmett. He is a very high fidelity medical simulation system, and he does really cool things. He breathes, he bleeds, he has vital signs. We can do all of the airway stuff that an EMT or a paramedic can do, but like I said, it gives us a realistic patient to actually apply tourniquets on and do wound packing on. He's pretty cool. Most of the Stop the Bleed classes that you're going to go to, you're probably not going to see a system like this in play. You're going to start off with things like task trainers, a packable wound trainer for wound packing, or maybe an arm like this that you can apply tourniquets to. A lot of the classes will have you apply the tourniquets to yourselves and each other. I'm a fan of that. The only problem with that sometimes is tourniquets hurt. People complain, oh, my arm's all bruised up. It hurt really bad. I didn't like that. This is a way to still be able to train on tourniquet application without hurting yourself or somebody else, getting bruised up, things of that nature. So you may end up seeing a task trainer like that in play. For the purposes of what we're doing right now, I'm going to show you self-application on myself, on my arm, and then here in a little while, I'll transition and I'll apply the tourniquet to Emmett's lower leg when I get him bleeding. So we are, again, TacMed Solutions. Our tourniquet is the soft tourniquet. This is the device that our whole company was founded on back in 2003. It's had a lot of iterations, a lot of improvements. Some of the feedback we had gotten in years past was that our tourniquet was a little bit more difficult to do self-application with, and I would have had to agree on some of those previous versions. Everything that is in this current model has been focused on improving that. So self-application with this one is very, very easy. I really like this iteration of the tourniquet. So again, it's the soft tourniquet. This rod right here, we call it the windlass. This is what we turn to start creating compression. Ours is aircraft aluminum. This device right here, we call it the track, the tourniquet retention assistance clip. That is truly meant to be a temporary assist so that when you're turning the windlass and you think you've got the bleeding stopped, you can drop this in here temporarily. It'll hold these notches that are on the end of the windlass combined with this triangle. We call it the tri-ring. That is the formal complete anchoring system for our tourniquet. If you're putting this on somebody else, you don't have to use this track, but it's there as an adjunct for if you're doing self-application. Underneath the windlass, you'll notice a little triangle on either side. We call those slack indicator wedges. That's meant to show you this space right here is still there. And that's a bad thing if you start turning this windlass, because all you're doing is taking up slack and it actually moves the windlass offline. So when we're taking that initial tension out that I'll show you here to do in a minute, those disappear up underneath there. So that as soon as you start turning this, we're generating compression. Speaking of compression, we have a true 1.5-inch flat webbing compression band. And that is really important for being able to compress the arteries up against the bone. And that's what tourniquets do. Those arteries are bleeding and we're going to put this around the limb, cinch it down, and this is going to pin that artery up against the bone so it stops bleeding. The last feature that I'm going to talk about is our quick release buckle. We're the only ones out there that have a quick release buckle where you can turn it, take it back, and clip it in. Where that is really important for me is if we're putting this on somebody else, there may be a situation where I can't just trace the tourniquet up the limb and get it into place. Either the limb is broken or it's trapped and I can't get to the end of the limb. The scenario that I always use is a motor vehicle crash where the dashboard is now in the patient's lap and I cannot physically get to the end of their limb. I can disassemble this, feed it around the limb, clip it back in on itself, and do something for that patient. The other thing that this is good for is self-application for a leg. Younger people are a lot more flexible, a lot less fluff and things like that. They can probably bend over, trace their own limb. I'm a little bit more mature, a little less flexible. All of those things combined, that's not exactly a great option for me, but I can sit there on my behind, disassemble this, feed it around my own leg, and still clip it in place and do something. Lastly, you can actually disconnect this and connect two of our tourniquets together. So regardless of the size of the patient, you can get around the diameter limb that you need to do business with. Okay, so let's talk about where tourniquets go. The old adage was always high and tight, as high up on the limb as you can get it, as high up on the arm, as high up on the leg as you can get it. That is still being taught if the situation is exigent or it's still emergent and you really can't do a thorough assessment, you can't figure out where the bleeding is coming from, go ahead and apply the tourniquet as high up on the arm, as high up on the leg as you can get it. The guidance now, and for several years now, has been to apply a tourniquet 2 to 3 inches above the wound. So if whatever the situation was that created this is over and it's now safe for us to do this, we want to apply this 2 to 3 inches above the wound, not on the wound and not over a joint. Lastly, the thing I wanted to cover, in years prior, the theory was we only wanted to apply a tourniquet around either the upper arm or the upper leg where we're dealing with just a single bone. People were concerned that if we applied a tourniquet around the forearm or around the calf where you've got two bones, they were afraid that it just wouldn't create the compression that we would need to actually make this thing effective. A lot of studies, a lot of research has been done that shows, no, it is still very effective to put the tourniquet on the lower limb. So if the wound is down here in the ankle, we can apply it 2 to 3 inches above. We don't have to come all the way up here. If it's an emergency situation where safety is still a bit of a concern, you can go here. But in this particular instance right here, you see this wound here. I'm going to try to go 2 to 3 inches above it here in a little while. So you'll see the tourniquet go right there. So again, 2 to 3 inches above the wound in a not necessarily an emergency situation, still going high and tight if we think the situation is still a danger to us and other folks. So tourniquets will be very painful to the patient. We're trying to pin that artery up against the bone. What else parallels the bone? Nerves. So at the same time as we're compressing that artery, we're compressing nerves. So when we talk about talking to the patient, this is going to be one of those moments where you're going to tell them, hey, I'm going to have to put a tourniquet on to get this bleeding stopped. It's probably going to hurt. Get ready for it. All right. So as you're getting your stuff ready, again, it lets them know what's going on. You're engaged with your patient. You're talking, you're breathing. All of those things are good. So we get the tourniquet in place. So I'm going to do self-application on my arm just so you can see what's going on. I come up here. A lot of people initially want to start pulling down. That's the first thing that I see a lot of people do. And then they just start looking like they're working the handle on a well. Once you get the tourniquet into place, I always advise pull up, pull out, then down. Release your grip, up, out, down. You want everything here where you can see it, you can deal with it. If all of this stuff ends up back here where you can't see it, you don't want to leave it there. Grab it, rotate it around into place where you can still deal with it. Okay. So now the windlass, we start turning it. And the big tricky question is, how many times are we going to turn it? Is it 2 times? Is it 3 times? It's going to be until the bleeding stops. Okay. Once we see the bleeding stop, we can drop this into the track and it will temporarily hold. Again, this is not a permanent anchor, because if I become combative or you start trying to move me and something hits this, it can open up, slack open, and we create a rebleed. So again, temporary assist. I can rest, dry my hand. Now I've got my whole hand free to come back and fully anchor that off. So that's an arm application, self-application. Again, if you're putting it on somebody else, you don't have to engage the track. It's there if you need it. But you putting it on somebody else, you shouldn't have to need it. There is also a time tag on the end. We do want to notate the time. I always go in like 15-minute estimates. 2 o'clock, 2:15, 2:30, 2:45, 3 o'clock, 3:15. I don't necessarily have to get 3:18, 3:22, whatever, that type of thing. Just 15-minute increments. We still want to keep track of the time. You can realistically leave a tourniquet on somebody for a couple of hours. They will be fine. They will not lose the limb because of a tourniquet application. If they put their arm in a tree shredder, they're going to lose their arm because they put their arm in a tree shredder, not because we applied a tourniquet. Back in the day, there was a lot of fear over tourniquets, that if you put a tourniquet on somebody 100% of the time, they would have to lose that limb from the point of application down. And I guess there was a civil case out there some point where a tourniquet was applied. It wasn't necessary. It was on for an extended period of time, and that guy did lose their limb. Civil lawsuits filed. So everybody was very terrified of tourniquets. Fighting 2 wars for 20 years, Iraq and Afghanistan, one of the good things that came out of that was a lot of really good medical data and research. And it showed that tourniquet application is very safe. Again, you can have them on for a couple of hours. It's not going to cause the patient to lose your limb. It's going to save their life. So please don't be hesitant and afraid to put a tourniquet on. We can put a tourniquet on. We can make a tourniquet tighter. We can put a second tourniquet on if we need to, but we're never going to loosen the tourniquet or take the tourniquet off in the field. Again, going back to that whole adage of, well, if I loosen the tourniquet up every once in a while, it'll let some blood flow, in quotes, rehydrate the limb and minimize the chances of them having to have their leg or arm amputated. That's folklore. Please don't do that. Put the tourniquet on, monitor it. Again, if you need to tighten it, if you need to put a second one on, good to go. Put the tourniquet on, leave it in place. This needs to be your go-to move. Again, people were afraid of tourniquets. And you'd hear people say, well, I tried this and I tried that, and it was referred to as a last ditch effort. Well, I put the tourniquet on, they still bled to death. Well, that's because you let all of their volume out onto the highway. You tried all this other ineffective stuff. And by the time you finally got around to trying to do a tourniquet, there was nothing in the system left to work with. Recognize the mechanism of injury, where it is, what type of bleeding on the arm or a leg. We're going for a tourniquet, and we're going to put it in play early, efficiently, and confidently. So arms and legs are what we're going to use a tourniquet on. Just remember, not for head wounds. Good to go? All right. So that is tourniquet application on the arm. So now I'm going to show you some wound packing. Wound packing is for places like this right here. We call it a junctional area. It's where the limb attaches to the torso. So we're talking about where the arms come into the pelvis, excuse me, where the legs come into the pelvis, or where the arms attach to the shoulders, or the neck in between the head and the shoulders. We can't get a tourniquet on there. No matter what I do, it's just not going to work. This is still arterial bleeding because that artery comes through the pelvis as it comes down into the legs. So I'm just useless if I'm trying to apply a tourniquet there. So I'm going to transition here to this device. I'll still show you that one here in a minute, but this is a packable wound trainer. It replicates the same injury that's in the pelvis. And you'll see me pushing my finger in there, you'll see that little light come on. I'll explain to you what that is. Wound packing can be done with something as simple as dry sterile gauze, okay? There's no magical chemicals in it or anything like that. It's just gauze. There are items out there that are called hemostatic agents. Some of the more common ones out there are Combat Gauze, Celox Rapid. We actually have a bandage, the Elias Hemcon, that has Chita-Gauze XR Pro in it. So basically it is the bandage, and on the inside is this Z-fold hemostatic agent. The blue lines that you see on there are meant to show up in an X-ray, so that when this patient goes into X-ray, they'll see that this wound has been packed with this. If I told you that a tourniquet is going to be painful, taking your issued insertion device and poking it down into somebody's wound is going to be very painful for that patient as well. This is a very aggressive technique. Where I see it fail is where people are too slow, or they're trying to be too nimbly bimbly, trying not to hurt the patient. You got to get past that. You have to be aggressive with this. I'm going to demonstrate this slow at first, just so you can see the techniques. When I do it here on this one later, you're going to see me pick up the pace a little bit. Both of the videos for American College of Surgeons and the Stop the Bleed Coalition show them just taking the gauze like this, putting their fingers in and driving it down into the bottom. Some people will teach you to make a little ball on the end. They call it a speed ball or power ball. I'm okay with that, but don't spend 30, 45 seconds doing origami trying to make a little pterodactyl or something. Just grab the end of it. What we're doing is we're trying to get down into the bottom of that wound and feel for where we think the source of the bleeding is. It's going to be a little pulsating vessel, and you'll feel the fluid coming around your finger. We're going to take this and we're going to drive it down into the bottom and put it on there. Now, what I don't want you to do is to put it in there, completely let go of the pressure, grab this, put some more in, let go of the pressure, grab some more. That's not what we do. We take that, we drive it down to the source of the bleeding, we hold pressure. We grab more, we trace that finger or thumb, and we never give up that pressure. We just transition from right hand to left hand to right hand, go back and forth. Again, I'm going slow here so you can see this. Constantly coming back down on top of it. And what we're doing is we're just making layers and layers and layers of this gauze on top of it till we fill that wound cavity up and we can't get any more in there. And then we're going to hold pressure. That little red light on this task trainer is indicating that I'm applying the correct amount of pressure. So once we get to this stage, if it is dry, sterile, compressed gauze, we're going to hold pressure for 5 minutes. If it's a hemostatic agent, we're going to hold pressure for 3 minutes. I'm going to take a break for just a second. The difference between the dried gauze and a hemostatic agents have chemicals in them that will help you get this bleeding stopped. All the different products that are out there, they may act a little differently from a chemistry standpoint, and I definitely don't want to go off chasing rabbits and trying to explain all that. That's a whole separate discussion. They work a little bit differently. The end result is that they will help you get this bleeding under control. So again, hemostatic agents have chemicals in them that will help you. Dry, sterile, normal gauze, there's no chemicals. That doesn't mean they're not effective. Good technique goes a long way, but when you combine really good technique with the technology of a hemostatic agent, that's what I call, quotes, more better, okay? So when you're holding that pressure, all right, whether it's 5 minutes if it's just gauze, 3 minutes if it's a hemostatic agent, holding that consistent pressure. What I don't want you doing is bouncing up and down, talking on radio, talking on your phone, waving at somebody, wiping the sweat off, swatting the bee away. Focus on this, okay? Still paying attention to your surroundings so that if for whatever reason this deteriorates and we find ourselves in an unsafe situation again, we can let go and go do things. Don't get such tunnel vision on this that you completely lose focus of what's going on around you as well. But we're going to hold that pressure evenly and consistently. The other thing that I see people do is they will do this knowing that they have to hold pressure for an extended period of time. And 30 seconds into it, this is what they're going to do. They're going to lift their hands, they're going to peak, and they're going to restart. You have to do this and trust that the magic is happening. Every time you do that, it's going to start the process over again, and it's going to become more and more difficult for this to work. You have to set this thing up for success. Be quick, be aggressive about it, and do all the different aspects of it correctly to make it work. At the end of that time, if it has set when you lift your hands and no more blood is gushing out, you can bandage it in place and go do other things. If when you lift your hands, bleeding is just coming everywhere, we did not get this in here quickly enough and we were not successful. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull everything that's in that wound out. We're going to get another packet of hemostatic agent or another packet of gauze, and we're going to do this again. And we're going to do this again until we get it right. Or, as they say, all bleeding eventually stops. All right. Our goal is to get it to stop the way we want it to stop on our timeline because of the efforts we've put into it. So again, normal gauze is good to go. Hemostatics are much better, but that's what wound packing is for there. All right. So I'm going to toss this one out for a minute. And here in just a second, I'm going to transition to showing you both tourniquets and wound packing on Emmett here. I'm going to put him in play and let you see all the fun stuff that he does. So I forgot to say this at the very beginning, and I apologize. If you have any questions along the way, put them in the chat box. A couple of our employees are hanging out in there, and they're going to try to respond to questions as we go along. Anything that they don't get to, I'm going to save a couple minutes here at the end, and we'll try to address those questions at the end to make sure that we get them covered. I'm going to go ahead and put some gloves on here because this will get messy here in just a second. For those of you that are not used to putting on gloves, don't get away with that. Properly unfurl them to make sure that you're giving yourself the full amount of protection that gloves are intended to do. If you rip a glove trying to put it on, okay, hopefully you have a couple sets and get one out there that's good to go. All right, so what I'm going to do is this guy is almost ready to go. When I push start and I turn him on, you're going to see his chest rising and falling. You're going to see arterial bleeding coming out of this. And you're also going to see this continuing to bleed. Now let's talk about this real quick. Tourniquet application. I should be able to get a tourniquet that's in my hands on this guy and secured within 30 seconds. If all is going well and I'm firing on all cylinders, I should be able to get a tourniquet on 30 seconds, at the most 45 seconds. This requires the wound packing time plus at a minimum 3 minutes if I'm using a hemostatic agent. So if I have both of these going on at the same time, I'm going to address the leg wound with the tourniquet first because I can get that done quickly. Then I'm going to shift my focus over to this. So I wanted to make sure you understood. Don't just pick one and go with one. Try to start making a determination of which one is the more serious, which one can I take care of first and eliminate so that I have the best productivity for this patient and being efficient in what I'm doing. All right, so here we go. We're going to start him up. There you go. So I'm going to take this tourniquet, feed it under the leg. 2 to 3 inches above. I'm gonna take as much of the slack out as I can. I'm gonna start turning the windlass. And I'm gonna turn it until the bleeding stops. And I'm gonna secure it in. That is fully anchored. This is still going. Now it's time for me to start addressing that. Down to the very bottom. Not giving up the pressure, hand over hand, finger over finger. And again, I kind of refer to it as like a little sewing machine motion. It's going from left to right, right to left. The big thing is get all of this goo down in here. As much as you can get this in here. Fill that up. And now we're going to hold pressure for 3 minutes. Okay, because the product that I was using, it was a hemostatic agent. Let me show you something here. On the remote, you'll notice that right here in the center, it's green on the tourniquet, which means it's stopped. And now it's going back and forth between green and red in the inguinal wound. When it's red, that means I'm not holding the correct pressure because I was trying to do it one-handed. But now that I've got the remote set up so that Nathaniel can show you what's on the screen and I'm applying the right amount of pressure, that bleeding is getting stopped, okay? And again, we're holding it for that 3 minutes until we're good to go. All right, we're good. The really neat thing about Emmett is he will actually measure time and volume. He'll measure how much blood came out of this, how long it took me to get occlusion with the tourniquet. It'll talk about how much blood came out of the inguinal wound. Did I hold the right amount of time, or did it keep continuing to reset because I wasn't holding the right amount of pressure? He's really neat. Highly encourage you as you're out there seeking out training. You know, it's kind of like crawl, walk, run. You want to go to a very basic class, get lots of good reps with a live instructor that can evaluate what you're doing, make sure that what you're doing is correct, you know, and adjust fire as you need to. Seek out some additional training that has moulage capabilities or scenarios or manikins in play, things of that nature. This really adds a level of realism to the training. Don't be surprised, though, if when you show up for your first Stop the Bleed class, you're just working with task trainers, arms, things of that nature. If those have been to this around any length of time, somebody, I guarantee you, has been to a class where there was a pool noodle involved with some duct tape on it or a towel where they make a wound packing station. That may be what you encounter. It's a good place to start, though, and just build up from there. Going back to the wound packing, there's a couple things I want to talk about. Where we do that, number one, the pelvic area, the meaty parts of the shoulder, the sides of the neck, those junctional areas where we can't get a tourniquet on. Where are we not going to wound pack? We're not going to poke our fingers into any hole that's up here in the brain housing group and watch their legs kick around, okay? We're not going to pack on the front of the throat because we'll choke them to death. They'll suffocate. Packing the sides of the neck is good to go. Meaty parts of the shoulder are good to go. The thoracic cavity, the chest, in between the diaphragm up here where the heart and the lungs are, we're not going to pack in there. It's a hollow cavity and it'll interfere with the hearts and the lungs. Excuse me, the heart and lungs. One heart, two lungs. All right. The last place we're not going to pack is the abdomen. Soft and squishy, okay? I could literally take a 5-gallon bucket of gauze and just keep poking it in there and it's not going to be effective. So think about where this is effective. Muscle and bone, muscle and bone, muscle and bone. I need to be able to get that pressure, counter pressure from when I am holding that pressure on there. Now, the wound packing. I told you on an arm or a leg, major bleeding, the first thing, the main thing that we're going to focus on is getting a tourniquet in place. If you have one tourniquet and they have major injuries to both legs, you can apply a tourniquet to one leg. You can wound pack as a primary intervention for the other leg. Wound packing is very effective. If you have multiple tourniquets, use multiple tourniquets. If you only have one tourniquet, use the one tourniquet as best you can, then wound pack on the other wound. So if we're running out of tourniquets, you can still wound pack and it'll be very effective for you. I also encourage people like this guy right here. I would have applied this tourniquet, and if he didn't have the inguinal wound, I would come back here and I would wound pack at the point of injury, go through all of those stages, bandage and hold that in place so that if this slacks up or this guy becomes combative or we go to move the patient and for whatever reason something happens to the tourniquet, this wound has been wound packed. It's kind of a backup. I like redundancy. I like backup. So wound packing can be very effective for a lot of different reasons, a lot of different techniques. So let's talk about the equipment. One of the questions that always comes up is, well, what if I don't have a tourniquet? Can I use a belt or can I use a shirt to wound pack? Sure. Okay. But I'm going to put an asterisk by that. It always comes down to you do the best with what you have where you're at. But that is not going to be as effective as if you have a really good piece of kit, meaning an actual tourniquet, an actual bandage, actual gauze, an actual hemostatic agent, actual chest seals if we get into that. You want good prefab stuffs where you're not having to Boy Scout, Girl Scout, MacGyver, wilderness medicine. And for those of you who don't know who MacGyver is, it's a really cool TV show. He could disarm a nuclear bomb with a paper clip and a stick of gum wrapped in aluminum foil. Good show. Go check it out. Not MacGruber, MacGyver. Okay. So I want to keep you out of that space. It's the same adage of, well, if I'm out and I'm lost in the wilderness, can I filter water with a handkerchief, some sand and some rocks and some tree moss? Sure. Or you could go get a life straw. Can I make fire by rubbing sticks together? Sure. Or you can carry a fire starting kit with a lighter. It's a lot easier for you, a lot more effective, a lot quicker. So start basic. If you're working with a budget, start with a tourniquet, add a bandage to it, add a hemostatic agent to them when you can. Or you can, if you're ready to go, we can put you in a different type of kit that's all complete, ready to go. I would encourage you, obviously I like TacMed Solutions, I work here. I'm always about mission first. Do your due diligence. If you find something else out there and I can't convince you to buy the soft tourniquet, get a good quality piece of gear, meaning expect to pay industry norms for these items. Upper 20s to upper 30s for a tourniquet. If you go online and you find somebody selling 4 tourniquets for $20, run away from that. That I 100% guarantee you is going to end up being counterfeit goods brought in from overseas. And one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to snap and fail when you're applying it, or it's going to hold momentarily, but very quickly it's going to start to slack up and it's going to create a rebleed. So my guidance is purchase directly from the big companies, TacMed Solutions, North American Rescue, those big companies, or a vetted, reputable, long-standing distributor like Galls or something like that. Don't just go off the internet. If the deal is too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Make sure that you're using good quality vetted equipment. As far as our stop the bleed kits go, we actually have basic, intermediate, and advanced. We have them in Mylar bags. We have them in nylon. You don't have to have nylon. Nylon is cool. It looks really nice. But if you have an existing backpack, or it's going to go on your boat, or it's going to go in your vehicle, or you just want it in your home, you can save a little bit of money by not having the nylon and just buying the Mylar bag. Besides the PPE, the emergency blanket, the CPR face shield, the trauma shears, the main components in the basic are one of our soft tourniquets and one of our Elias trauma bandages. It is a bandage that looks like that, except it just has dry, sterile comp gauze on the inside, not a hemostatic agent. When we bump up to the intermediate, we swap out the normal Elias for the Elias Hemcon so that the gauze on the inside is a hemostatic agent. And our advanced kit is the tourniquet, the Elias Hemcon, and a set of Halo chest seals for being able to deal with sucking chest wound. Technically, sucking chest wounds aren't part of Stop the Bleed. I do believe at some point in time that's going to get addressed and maybe included because it's a very simple, superficial technique that if we can teach you how to poke your fingers in somebody's pelvis, we can teach you how to apply a chest seal. So I think those are coming down the road someday officially, but they're not there yet. But we do include them, and other manufacturers also put chest seals in their Stop the Bleed kits. We have other kits that are not officially logoed Stop the Bleed. So if you really want the one with the little hand on it, that's a Stop the Bleed kit. We have other IFAKs and things like that, individual first aid kits that aren't necessarily logoed Stop the Bleed. For the training, again, I told you earlier, there's 2 main entities out there that do the Stop the Bleed training. One is the American College of Surgeons. Their website is stopthebleed.org. You can go to their website and they will dial you in your area to where a class is happening. Some of them are butts in seat classes. You go and you spend 4 hours there and it's all in the classroom. Love it. Some of them are hybrids. You'll watch a video online. You'll come in with a completion code, but you will still show up to do hands-on skills checkoff with an instructor. Good stuff. The other entity is the Stop the Bleed Coalition. Their website is stopthebleedcoalition.org. Same exact thing. You can go on their website, find out where they're doing the training. Please go get good hands-on training. Don't let this little webinar think in your mind that you've got it covered. Go get good hands-on training. It's Memorial Day weekend. It's Stop the Bleed month. So for the next 4 days, we're running a sale on our Stop the Bleed kits. Our tourniquets are 25% off. Our select bandages and certain IFACs are 20% off. And our actual logoed Stop the Bleed kits are 10% off. And that will run through Memorial Day. So if you want to take advantage of that, our website is tacmedsolutions.com, or you can call our customer service. Actually, we're going to be closed over the weekend, so don't call our customer service, but you can order online. If you ever do need to reach us at customer service on days that aren't holidays and things like that, it's area code 864-224-0081. So that is an awful lot of stuff that I've covered in 50 minutes. We're slated for an hour. So I want to stop here and see if there's any questions in the chat box that our employees haven't been able to get to along the way, or if anything has come up at the end. I'm getting that everything's been taken care of as we went along. So the manikins, again, probably you're not going to show up at a Stop the Bleed class and see a device like this ready to go, but there are other levels of training out there: tactical combat casualty care, tactical emergency casualty care, combat lifesaver type courses, wilderness medicine, emergency management, mass casualty response. There's all types of training. What happened to me was when I went after that Columbine class, I said, okay, I got to do better. My initial goal was I'm just going to go become an EMT. It's a 1 college semester course. I can stand on my head and knock it out. I got into it. I found out I liked it. I had some aptitude for it. So I just stood on my head for the next 3 years and burned out and got dual certified as a paramedic. You don't have to do that. But what I hope will happen for you is that you will go to a Stop the Bleed class and again, get your interest piqued, go get that training, and you're going to want more and you're going to want more. I would also encourage you to do annual training. All right. Again, go get that initial training and then go back a year later and do it again for a refresher. There's no like mandatory, it's not like CPR where there's a mandatory recert every 2 years or something like that. It's incumbent upon you to go do that. So I would encourage you, please go get training on a frequent basis. It's kind of like firearms training. I'd rather you go out quarterly and shoot than one day and fire 500 rounds a year. Frequency is good to go for recall and things of that nature. Garrett's got a question here, I think.
So the 2 acronyms that you went over at the very beginning.
Yes, absolutely. So PAFI stands for P is perceive, A is analyze, F is formulate, I is initiate. So P is I am perceiving that there's a situation going on. Analyzing means I'm going through all of my mental Rolodex and history about all of my training, all of my experiences. What are my best options? F is I am formulating. I'm taking that information. I'm formulating a plan. And I means I am initiating it. I am putting it into play. So PAFI, PAFI. It's just it's a way to mentally work your way through decision making. And the goal is to speed up your decision making through training, through practice, through repetition, through recall. And the more frequency, the more training, the better that recall is going to be. Versus if you just watch this webinar, you wait a year and a half, I promise you, you're going to stand there, you're going to go, ugh. Okay. That's what we want to avoid. The other one is AVPU, AVPU. And that one was specifically meant to help you assess where someone's mental level is. And I don't mean are they smart or dumb. What I mean is where are they on conscious alert and things of that nature. So A is alert, meaning they're awake, they're alert. It's me and you talking. I know my name, the day of the week, all of those types of things. I am good to go. I'm firing on all cylinders. V is verbal. I'm still sluggish. My eyes are closed, but I hear you talking and I can still verbally respond, albeit not as good as when I was fully alert. P means I'm kind of unconscious now. Okay. I'm not responding to your verbal questions, but you can grind your knuckles into my sternum. You can pinch my earlobe real hard, and you'll see me respond to a painful stimulus. That lets me know, okay, I'm still sort of there, but I'm on my way in a bad direction. U is unresponsive. It doesn't matter how hard I grind my knuckles into their sternum, how hard I pinch their earlobe, I'm getting no reaction. That's not good. So again, it's just ways of gauging where someone is on a mental acuity list.
Somebody else had a question, Eric. Any protocols that could be used to condition oneself to not get queasy?
Ooh, that's a good question. So for me, the sight is never an issue. The sounds are never an issue. The smells can be overwhelming at times, especially if the wound involves gut wounds. And a lot of times where people experience trauma, they will void themselves. So you get an interesting dynamic of internal guts smell mixed with fecal matter and things of that nature. The smell can be a little overwhelming. And I've seen people just, that's not their thing. They can't do it. And there's no shame in that, because I'd rather you find out now so you know, hey, my best role in this may be to be the one that's calling 911. I know where the IFAC is. I know where the AED is. I know where the fire extinguisher is, the bad wall in the building. I'm going to go get that. I'm going to call 911. I can still be effective to this. The biggest thing is repetition, though, man. You got to be able to push through it. For some people, it's just the sight of blood freaks them out. For some people, it's the sounds. For me, it was the smell. And I'm not going to sit there and say I felt it come up, that kind of thing. You just got to push through it. If you got to turn your head, blow chunks, and come back and keep going, you got to do what you got to do. But the biggest thing that I would say is, work in some scenario training. There are classes out there where they will make a pot of guts hanging out in the sun for hours. So when you walk up on the casualty, it stinks when you're there. I have seen classes do things like that. Obviously, that's a little bit extreme, but there are things like that, that if that's an issue that you're specifically experiencing, there are ways that you can help yourself work through that.
Just one last question here. Once the gauze is applied and you wait 5 minutes, what do you do with the rest that's hanging out?
You can just leave it hanging out. You can cut it. Again, the kits come with trauma shears. So if there's excess like this, you can cut it right there, throw it away, take the bandage. Usually what I do, though, is I just take it, put it underneath the bandage, and now wrap it in place. So you don't really have to worry too much about it. One of the things I would recommend, excuse me here while I bend over to pick this back up, if you use a hemostatic agent, whether it's ours or combat gauze or Celox Rapid, when the bandage is in place, I would take the empty wrapper and just tuck it in the bandage on one of the outer wraps, so that you're talking to an ambulance crew who may be taking them to a helicopter, who may be taking them to the trauma center. It's like that game of telephone. Does what you say on scene translate all the way through to the trauma center? It may get lost in transport and in translation. If this is here and it makes it in there, people can look at this. Nowadays, every trauma center knows what this is, and they'll know that that means that wound got packed with a hemostatic agent. So that's just another good tip for that. Any last remaining questions, Garrett?
Can you just let everybody know that the recording for this webinar?
Sure. So what Garrett just informed me is the recording of this event is going to be sent out in a follow-up email. So you'll be able to go back and review it again. Again, I really encourage you, don't just rely on Lieutenant Dan's webinar. Okay. I didn't certify you in anything. Okay. I mainly just fired you, familiarized you with what Stop the Bleed is, what the techniques are, what the equipment involved is, so that hopefully I'm piquing your interest and making you think, I think I can go out and do that. I want to get trained for that, for myself, for my family, for my coworkers, for people that I don't know. I think we're all better off when we kind of have that aspect in mind, that we're going to do the best we can for our fellow man. So please go out and get really well trained, repetitively trained, in-person training. All right. I'm not necessarily a fan of online training, says the guy that's doing a webinar. Hands-on training, go get it. Go to either the American College of Surgeons or the Stop the Bleed Coalition. They'll be able to dial you into a training that's near you. And again, get good equipment, verify your equipment, and just, again, get proficient, carry the equipment with you. And I promise you, there will come a time where you can make a difference. And I want you to be confident, competent, well-trained, well-equipped. So on behalf of TacMed Solutions, myself, the crew that's here, and all of our employees around the United States and the world right now, thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to do this. Stay safe out there and stay motivated.